At exactly 0314 hours on March 27, 2026, a precision-guided munition detonated inside a hardened command compound on the outskirts of Isfahan. The target was not a missile silo. It was not a radar array. It was a man Rear Admiral Alireza Tangsiri, commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' Navy. The single most dangerous naval tactician in the Persian Gulf, the man who designed Iran's asymmetric chokehold strategy for the Strait of Hormuz, the man who personally supervised the mining of 3 international shipping lanes, gone, vaporized inside his own operations center in under 2 seconds, and at that exact moment in Tehran's Supreme National Security Council emergency chamber, a single encrypted message was sent simultaneously to 3 separate commands: the IRGC Aerospace Force, the Houthi General Command in Sana'a, and the militia network embedded inside Saudi Arabia. The message contained 2 words: execute Protocol Zulfiqar. What happened over the next 6 hours was not a retaliation. It was the detonation of a trap that Iran had been coiling for 29 days. A 3-front synchronized strike designed to do one thing: drag the United States into a war it cannot fight on 3 oceans at the same time. The level of what you are about to hear has no precedent. In post-Cold War military history, stay with me. Israel's military confirmed it killed the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's Navy in a strike on Isfahan. NPR, but what the official statement did not say, and what a Central Command classified within the hour, was that the strike had been triple confirmed by SIGINT intercepts showing Tangsiri was conducting a live fire coordination call with 3 Houthi naval units positioned near the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. He wasn't just a commander. He was the active trigger man for the Hormuz closure network, personally relay authorizing each ship harassment event in real time from that compound. The Israeli Air Force had tracked his pattern of communication for 11 days. The strike package for F-35I aircraft flying under complete MCON silence from a desert staging point executed a JASS Emir standoff launch from beyond Iranian radar acquisition range. The warheads were pre-programmed with dual redundant GPS and infrared terminal guidance. There was no margin for error. There was no margin for survival. But here is what Tel Aviv did not account for. Tangsiri had a dead man's switch, not metaphorical, literal. Protocol Zulfiqar was a pre-authorized, pre-delegated strike order that required no further command input once its originating officer was confirmed killed. It was designed specifically to survive a decapitation strike 3. Confirmation sensors registered Tangsiri's biometric absence. 17 minutes after the Isfahan strike, the protocol went active across all 3 theaters simultaneously. The trap was already built. Israel had just pulled the pin. An Iranian attack injured at least 10 US service members on Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. CNN, but the classified incident report tells a far more surgical story than the casualty numbers suggest. At 0947 local time, 4 Shahed 238 jet-powered kamikaze drones, not the propeller variants that US CIWS systems have practiced against for 2 years, but the supersonic upgrade variants that fly at 0.8 Mach in a nap of the Earth trajectory, entered the airbase perimeter from a vector that crossed directly through the radar shadow created by Saudi Arabia's Patriot PAC-3 battery positioning. The targeting was not guesswork. The attack vector had been calculated from drone reconnaissance sorties that Iran's proxies conducted over the preceding 6 weeks while disguised as agricultural survey flights in the Riyadh Basin. 2 of the 4 drones were intercepted by CRAM counter-rocket artillery mortar systems deployed by the 378th Air Expeditionary Wing. 1 experienced a terminal phase navigation failure and impacted open desert. The 4th found its target, the maintenance hangar adjacent to the fueling ramp where USAF F-15E strike. Eagles assigned to Operation Inherent Retribution were being armed for the next morning's strike package against Iranian oil infrastructure in Khuzestan province. The explosion shredded the forward fuselage of 2 aircraft and the right engine of a 3rd. The blast overpressure injured 10 service members, 4 of whom suffered ruptured eardrums and traumatic fragment wounds requiring immediate medevac. But the strategic damage was not the casualties. It was the aircraft. 3 F-15Es are now non-mission capable. The U.S. just lost 3 precision strike platforms at the precise moment Trump was considering escalating the energy infrastructure campaign. The timing was not coincidental. It was mathematically perfect. Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz in response to US and Israeli airstrikes, and Iran attacked some 20 ships during the past 3 weeks of the conflict. NPR, but with Tangsiri gone, the network didn't collapse, it metastasized, because Tangsiri had deliberately built a decentralized command structure for exactly this contingency. Each of the IRGC Navy's 6 fast attack craft squadrons operating in the Persian Gulf now operates under independent tasking authority. They don't wait for orders. They execute pre-assigned harassment grids autonomously. At 1,015 hours, less than an hour after the Prince Sultan attack, IRG Fast Boat Squadron Delta 12 Sayraj 1 class patrol craft equipped with C-802 anti-ship missiles and heavy machine gun mounts executed a swarming intercept of a Pakistani-flagged oil tanker transiting under the newly negotiated bilateral safe passage agreement. Iran had agreed to allow 20 ships under Pakistani flag to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. CNN that agreement died at 1,015 hours. The tanker Al-Qamar, carrying 2.1 million barrels of crude for the Indian state refinery system, was forced to heave to under armed escort while IRG personnel conducted what they called a compliance inspection, in reality, a deliberate 9-hour detention designed to demonstrate that Iran's word on safe passage is tactically worthless. 70 nautical miles northwest, USS Gravely, an Arleigh-Burke-class destroyer operating as tactical air defense coordinator for the carrier USS George Hugh Bush Strike Group, which had just entered CENTCOM's area of responsibility, went to general quarters. The Gravely's AN-SPY 1D radar was painting 16 surface contacts. Exhibiting aggressive maneuvering profiles, her captain faced an impossible calculation: engage the fast boats and potentially trigger the full mining activation of the southern transit lane, a contingency that U.S. naval intelligence assessed would strand over 200 vessels and trigger an immediate global oil supply shock, or back down and watch an allies tanker sit in illegal detention. He chose a third option. He called it the Gravely's AN-SELC 32V6 electronic warfare suite began broadcasting on IRG Navy tactical frequencies not to jam, but to spoof, flooding their fire control systems with false radar returns that made the destroyer appear to be simultaneously in 12 different positions. 3 of the Sayraj 1 craft turned to engage a ghost. The remaining 9, suddenly unsure of their tactical picture, broke off the tanker intercept and reformed at a defensive distance. The Al-Qamar was free, but the Strait was not. And in Washington, the National Security Council had just been told that Iran's fast boat network was no longer centrally controlled and could not be deterred through back-channel negotiation. Every transit was now a live fire event. Yemen's Iran-aligned Houthis confirmed they had launched an attack on Israel for the first time during the current U.S.-Israel war against Iran. NBC News: this was not symbolic. This was the reopening of a front that U.S. Central Command had explicitly assessed as neutralized after 18 months of sustained strikes on Houthi missile infrastructure. The assessment was wrong. At 1,342 hours local time, Israeli Air Defense Command registered a launch signature from the Sada Governorate in northwestern Yemen, 1,850 kilometers from Tel Aviv. The incoming projectile was identified by the Arrow 3 exoatmospheric interceptor battery at Ramon Air Base as a Tufan ballistic missile variant, a medium-range weapon that Houthi forces were not assessed to possess in operational quantities following the May 2025 ceasefire. They had hidden them. For 10 months, they had concealed a reconstituted ballistic missile capability inside tunnel complexes in the Sada Mountains, pre-positioning the launchers in hardened rivets disguised as agricultural storage facilities. They had been waiting for exactly this moment. The Arrow 3 intercept succeeded at an altitude of 142 kilometers, a textbook terminal phase kill shot that the IAF operators will rightly be proud of. The debris field impacted uninhabited desert southeast of Beersheva. No casualties, but the strategic alarm bell was deafening, because if the Houthis have reconstituted ballistic missile capability, that means the Red Sea is no longer a secondary theater. It means every ship transiting the Bab el-Mandeb is operating within range of a reconstituted anti-ship missile network. The Gulf's ability to defend itself is affected by the reality of asymmetric warfare, mixed platforms, swarm tactics, and geographically dispersed attacks risk saturating air defenses, while prolonged conflict could strain the resupply of interceptors. ACLD 3 theaters, 3 simultaneous activations, 1 dead man's switch. Israel's chief of staff warned government ministers Wednesday that with multiple war fronts open, the Israel Defense Forces are under severe strain. CNN that warning was issued before the triple activation. It is now a documented operational crisis. The IDF is currently managing active combat operations in Lebanon, where over 1,000 fatalities, both militants and civilians, have been recorded by late March. Wikipedia: they are conducting sustained strike packages against Iranian nuclear and industrial infrastructure. They are defending against Houthi ballistic missiles from 1,800 kilometers. They are suppressing Hezbollah rocket salvos across northern Israel. And they are doing all of this with an air wing that US intelligence has privately assessed is operating at 73% sortie capacity due to airframe fatigue and munitions expenditure rates that exceed pre-war stockpile projections. Iran warned a heavy price will be paid after Israeli attacks on nuclear sites, and Tehran accused the U.S. and Israel of playing with fire by targeting energy infrastructure. Al Jazeera, that language is not diplomatic. It is the authorized public release of an escalation threshold already crossed internally, Iran's Supreme National Security Council now operating without Ali Larijani, who was assassinated by Israeli intelligence on March 17th, is functionally in emergency decapitation continuity mode, running off pre-authorized strike packages precisely because its command hierarchy has been systematically dismantled over 29 days of precision strikes. This is what makes the current moment the most dangerous of the entire conflict. A decapitated military structure that is executing pre-authorized autonomous strike orders is not a military that can be negotiated with. There is no commander to call. There is no off-ramp that requires centralized decision-making, because the decision-making apparatus no longer exists in the form that generated these orders. The U.S. Special Envoy is waiting for Tehran's response to a 15-point peace plan. Al Jazeera, but who exactly is going to sign that response? And do they have the institutional authority to halt Protocol Zulfiqar once it is running? Meanwhile, the Pentagon is deploying up to 3,000 paratroopers from the Army's 82nd Airborne Division to the Middle East, with thousands of Marines also on their way. NPR, a force composition that is optimized for one thing that the White House has publicly denied 3 times this week: a ground operation. You do not deploy the 82nd Airborne to guard an airbase. You deploy the 82nd Airborne to seize one. Trump's 10-day pause on Iranian energy infrastructure strikes until April 6th, NPR reads, as a diplomatic off-ramp. Military planners inside CENTCOM read it differently. It is a window, a 10-day window to pre-position assets, forward deploy logistics, and establish air superiority over southwestern Iran, specifically over the 340 kilometers of road network between the Strait of Hormuz coastline and the Karg Island oil terminal. Trump is weighing whether to seize Karg Island, Iran's main oil processing facility. NPR, which processes 90% of Iran's export revenue, seize Karg Island and you end the war economically in 72 hours. You also start a conflict that no current treaty architecture is equipped to contain. Here is what you need to understand about where we are right now. This is not a war between 2 countries. It is a war between 2 strategic philosophies. The United States and Israel believe that decapitation, removing commanders, destroying infrastructure, eliminating decision-makers degrades an adversary's ability to fight. And in every conventional war model, they are right. But Iran spent 15 years specifically designing its military architecture to survive and accelerate after decapitation. Protocol Zulfiqar is not a failure mode. It is the intended mode. A military that becomes more dangerous when its leadership is killed is a military designed for exactly the kind of war that is now unfolding. The question that no analyst in Washington has publicly answered, but every war game at the Naval War College has modeled, is this: what happens when the U.S. finally does strike Karg Island and the pre-authorized mining package for the southern Hormuz transit lane activates automatically? There is no Iranian commander left to call. There is no red phone. There are only preloaded manta ray mines settling into the mud of the world's most critical shipping lane, and 20,000 seafarers stranded in a body of water that has just become a minefield. What would you do in the next 10 days? Comment below, because the clock is already running, and this time there is no snooze button.